Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Rebuilding Phase event. I'm so happy that you are here. Today, I have Taylor Jackson with me. Taylor, if you could introduce yourself to everyone.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. Hi, I'm Taylor Jackson. I am the founder of Valora Astrology. And so I am an NCGR Level 1 certified astrologer and a Sui Reiki master who focuses on helping people find and get back to their power, purpose, and connection with themselves.
Love that. So beautiful. And Saturn Return is such a moment in life where it feels like it can feel like you've lost yourself a bit. And so today we're going to be talking about going from the destruction of the old, which is Saturn's kind of thing that it does, to the construction of the new. So, new you, new space, whatever it is. So, my first question for you, Taylor, is let's start with something that's a little bit tough to swallow, right? Most people see their Saturn return as something that happened to them. We talked about, or we'll be talking about grief in this particular summit. We'll be talking about how to like rebuild from that grieving place. But a lot of times people see the things that happen during their Saturn return as something that's happened to them. So, how do we shift it from seeing it as random bad luck to recognizing it as foundation laying?
Absolutely. What's funny is that you use the word random, and that is probably the word I would least associate with Saturn. And I'm saying this from the perspective of someone with Saturn is my chart ruler, very, very close to this planet. But I'd say the main thing about that reframe is Saturn really is like on your team, not in an egocentric way per se, but a lot of times the challenges that get brought into our lives are there because we want to create something, because we want to build something. So, for example, if you're going to say, if you say to Saturn, I want to get stronger, Saturn's going to hand you a bunch of barbells and heavy weights and say, get after it. Like, this is how you actually develop internal strength. And so, there's a way I think we can reframe again the challenge is like, what is this strengthening? And at least try to see what can come out of a situation that subjectively feels really bad.
Yes, I love that so much. Like Saturn is gonna ask you to prove it, kind of energy.
Yeah.
And so when you say, that Saturn is gonna give you what you asked for, but kind of give you a test. I always like to say to my clients, disruption follows intention, right? So you set that
Hmm.
intention, and then Saturn comes with that disruption. What's the difference between like what Saturn is trying to show you or help you prove versus what you think you actually wanted or how you think it actually is supposed to go. Because sometimes people get caught in that like gap of like, I wanted this and I thought this was supposed to be easy. And then when it's not, they interpret it as, oh, well, this must not be for me. So what is Saturn trying to kind of show you in that interim gap?
Definitely. I'd say a big thing is Saturn is showing you what you're going to need to get the thing you actually want.
Mm,
A lot of times, so you'll see like a Saturn transit on a client's midheaven or something like that. And that might be this big promotion, but that big promotion requires them to go from working, 8 effective hours per day to 12,
mhm.
exactly. It's like we try to balance those things out in our lives. So Saturn really is showing you what it's actually going to take to get where you're going to go. If you look at anyone who you consider to be a champion, if you look at the Steph Currys, LeBron James of the world, you look at like okay, I saw Beyonce. This is gonna seem like a tangent, but I went to Beyonce's Cowboy Carter tour on the rain night in New York, New Jersey, the night where it rained the entire 3 hours. And I went in a fan and I left in probably a left probably like a cult member because she and the entire team gave a full out show in the pouring rain. Everything was ready, everything was crisp. She left nothing to chance. And as I was watching her, I just said, wow, this is hours and hours and years of intense preparation to be able to do something like this. Most people cannot do this. And so when I see that, I see challenges that she probably ran into, times where shows didn't go well, the one time she fell, things like that, where, all of that cumulatively created just this like superhuman powerhouse that is not going to exist from the benefics alone, from Venus and Jupiter alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that so much, that idea of like she has all those contingencies, right? It's very Virgo of her to have all those
It's
contingencies.
really,
And to be able to put the whole show on, I mean, lights and dance and everything in the rain, right? That speaks to like costuming, makeup. How is her makeup not dripping off of her face? Like so much. I'm a big fan of Beyonce as well. And I think it's, as we have grown in class consciousness, there's been a lot of critique of her. But I feel like, yes, while billionaires are deeply problematic, I think that you have to be able to separate the art from the artist, or we have to throw away so much art because a lot of artists are deeply troubled human beings. And when you just look at her art on its face, it is glorious. It is something to really be admired. So huge fan as well. In that same vein, like that night of the Beyonce concert where kind of your experience was being altered by the rain, right? Like you had to,
Yeah.
did they give out ponchos or anything, or everybody was just like on their own?
Everybody brought their ponchos and put the cowboy hats on top of the ponchos. It was really funny scene.
Yeah, that sounds
But yeah,
funny.
everybody was there the full 3 hours. And at one point she even said, she said, if you guys are out here for 3 hours in the pouring rain, I'm giving you a show for 3 hours in the pouring rain. And it just felt like, okay, that's something that a lot of people can't do.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, some people have had in their Saturn return, they've had their career maybe taken from them, or, they didn't, they're realizing that some of their career aspirations aren't going to be what they want it to be. Maybe they have relationships that didn't work out. Maybe they had a health concern that really scared them. What is that construction process of building this new version of yourself in your 30s look like? Or how is it different depending on what Saturn took apart?
yeah. Oh, big question.
Yeah.
I would say, especially it's between personal experience and working with clients. First, there is that grieving process. Like just because Saturn is, the bitter part of the medicine for us, it doesn't mean we just have to jump to immediate optimism. Like the things Saturn takes, they hurt. They are the security blankets, the plans we thought we were going to have, the things we thought that we needed, people we thought we'd be in our lives for a very long time. I got yeeted out of traditional employment over and over again during my Saturn return, and Saturn was like, "Go be an entrepreneur." but,
Mm,
um, but it was basically I felt like a big Doc Martin boot just kept kicking me. Like, have you gotten the point yet? Like, are
yeah.
you figuring it out? But in order to really move forward, I did have to be very present with myself and my feelings around fear, around security, around like, okay, this is taking something from me that I think that I need. I have to address and hold the part of me that feels so deeply like I need it, and not downplay that, not quiet that, and then figure out, okay, really look inside myself, see what resources I have. Resourcing is a huge part of getting into that rebuilding phase. So there's that, you know, complete life upside down emotional journey. And then there's your personal inventory of who do I know, what do I have, what's my skill set, what are my experiences. If this is a boulder that I can't get around, if I can't get around this particular thing, how am I going to go over it? Like how am I going to work with this obstacle instead of pretending it doesn't exist?
Mhm. Mm, I love that so much. And you said a couple of things, resources, which I often think about as kind of a Saturnian word, right? Like resources, who gets them and who doesn't, essentially. And the idea of the boulder, you mentioned like moving a boulder up that hill, and the myth of Sisyphus. Are you familiar with that myth?
Oh,
Yeah.
very
And so for
deeply.
anyone, yeah, for anyone who's not, the myth of Sisyphus is essentially Sisyphus had to roll a boulder up a hill, but he was condemned to never make it to the top. So something would happen and the boulder would always roll back down, and he'd have to start, and he had to do that for eternity. One of my favorite quotes about life and the way that we are living, and how, especially when you're in this kind of drudgery of rebuilding who you are, my favorite quote is, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. Like that totally
Mhm.
turns the myth on its head. If you imagine that he's enjoying building, like he's enjoying just trying to get it up the hill every day. And that to me, like, kind of dovetails into the next question of like, how do people know, or how can they safeguard against the temptation to rebuild exactly what they had before, exactly what Saturn knocked down, especially if they think that, oh, this is what I was supposed to have. I was supposed to have a relationship with this person. I was supposed to have this job. So they just kind of try to run point on getting it back instead of trying to build something new, which is what something more sustainable and more aligned, which is what Saturn kind of wants. So why doesn't that work, right? And how can they resist that urge?
So I'd say first, in that traditional astrological sense, Saturn represents our fear. And so one of the big things is it's very scary to do something different, like that dramatically different. And again, being present with that, sitting with that, and seeing what that brings up is one of the best ways to start to shift away. Chronicling what wasn't working about the previous path you were on or the previous thing you were doing. Because especially when you look back over it, you'll see, oh, I said I wanted, or maybe that relationship actually had 3 of the deal breakers that I said were deal breakers, but I'm still really going to try to make it work. There's this way that those compromises come in, and Saturn really calls your bluff about those things. But I think, like any living being, like any mammal, like human beings inherently fear change. Even if it's changed for the better, it's daunting, it's scary, it's wide, it's open, it's, outside of the routine, outside of what we know. And so I think one of the biggest what I see happen a lot when people keep trying to turn back to the thing that they had is the sense of familiarity and the sense of comfort, even if they were deeply unhappy.
Yeah.
And so, to me, as I'm, counseling or guiding someone through that part of this transition, one, it's really being fully present with what you want for your life and what that previous thing was or wasn't delivering for you. And then looking at change with that lens of what if. So for every anxiety, meeting that with but what if, or if I could, in my ideal world, what would my life look like? And trying to steer your own path from a place of hope and optimism and excitement about how good it could get, as opposed to fear of what might happen in the negative.
Love that so much. And what it sounds like you're saying is that there's an element of Venusian work inside our Saturn work. And that if you like have a wounded Venus or haven't done that Venus work, then it's going to make Saturn work even more difficult because you don't know what you want. You don't know what you value. And all of that kind of lives in Venus. And so I love that so much. And in that same vein, I guess, how do people know whether they're playing it too small? Because I know that sometimes on the other end of that Saturn destruction, it can feel like, well, now I'm scared to get my hopes up, right? Well, now I'm scared to try because what if that happens again? So, how do people know if they're playing too small? How do they avoid playing it too safe in that construction phase and really learn to get their hopes up?
I find that the biggest cues are irritability, criticism, and jealousy.
Mm,
And because if you're too small, just I don't know. I had a client I was working with who spent the first 10 minutes of the session just, I'm sick of this, I'm tired of this, and this is this. And I really, I looked at their chart, very big, very powerful chart. And I looked at these just the minutia that they were talking about. And I said, do you have a big goal? They thought I was going to answer all the questions about. They're like, no. I was like, what big goal did you put down? Because I'm like, none of this would matter to you if you were going after your big goal. All this would roll off your back like water off a duck if you were
mhm.
going after your big goal. And so when you're getting really, really nitpicky, and I'm not talking about sensory overwhelm or anything like that, but when stuff that usually wouldn't bother you is getting to you, or you see a person doing their thing and you're like, oh, well, they should do that and the camera should be better. And then you
Mhm.
just there's just this like there's this like weird buzzy gnat mosquito energy hovering around you. And I think when you feel that, you're playing it way too small.
And as it's tricky with certain astrological energies like Virgo. I'm a Virgo rising. And
Yeah.
so it's like, that net, it almost feels like it's ingrained. But like you said, when you are going for your big goal and you are like, there are women and people out here that I need to help. What's behind you doesn't matter, right? Like the lighting is not that important. It's like the people that need to hear this message are going to be listening. So love that you
Absolutely.
pointed that out. And so what Can you walk us through what it looks like to start the construction in your 30s of this like next level life? Like, what's the first brick that you would tell someone to lay?
It's funny. I think we're going back to, I'd call it Venusian and North Node work in terms of what are this what is your value? What are your values? What are your core values? What do you feel matters to you the most? I remember. I wish I had the source of this podcast I listened to before. I'll try to find it. But I remember hearing a quote from someone that said, "The work that you're meant to do, if you imagined yourself doing it and not getting credit for it, would you still feel fulfilled, or would you need the credit?" And again, that's not saying to not give yourself credit for your work, especially as women, especially as folks of color, not saying to not do that, but as an internal gauge, is this something that matters so much to you that you just want it done? And it's not like you just want it to happen even more than you want like your face or your name on it. Like, I think that has been a really good barometer and kind of a compass orienter for me to say, wow, this truly deeply matters to me. So, and again, starting there, the other thing too, even looking at a chart, the way that you're working or the things you're doing every day or the things you're doing for money, they can all be separate things. So you can have this mission and purpose and you can do something else for cash. There's all of that. Everyone doesn't have to, follow a nonprofit work situation. But I'd say starting with the core of those values, and again, starting with your own personal strengths assessment, with like what lights you up, what gets you excited, and then figuring out how to work more of that into your life. There are elements we can find everywhere, and especially there's the joy that comes from just the lounge around and that fantastic beach vacation, and there's the joy that comes from that huge accomplishment that you're so proud of. And I think there's two different flavors of so many different flavors of joy, but those two in particular, you can start to assess that and say, all right, where do I want to begin to structure this? And again, look to those resources, internal, external, all around. Ask third parties and trusted mentors and people who are honest with you. Hey, where do you see me light up? What do you think I'm underutilizing? Where should I be going? We're in community for a reason. We can't clearly 100% see ourselves. And a lot of times folks around you who truly love you and see you might have answers that you were missing.
So beautiful. You're absolutely right. And that, it makes me think about the fear and the fear of disappointment that so many people operate under, and reaching out to other people and saying, how did you get through this? What did you do? Like, you're probably not the first person going through what you're going through. And so being in community with other people is so important. I love that point. And kind of to my point, how would you suggest someone handle fear, right? When they're building again, and when it might get their tower might get knocked over again, right? Like, how do you build with courage and acceptance of what might happen instead of constantly trying to protect it?
So I very much am engaged in Buddhist like spiritual practices, a number of different types of religious spiritual practices, but in particular, I'd say one thing is to not dismiss fear. Folks have a tendency, everyone has a tendency to want to put aside negative emotions for fear of, feeling them forever. And so I'd say number one is to really truly sit with and be present with your fear, where it lives in your body, what thoughts it brings up, what old experiences come to mind, like what's really shaking you to your core, and giving it space to breathe and space to say, okay, like you can walk with me on this journey. I'll scoop you up in my arms and we will go to this next place together, you and me, my fear. And it'll begin to calm and it'll begin to settle if you do that. But I think suppressing it is the worst way to give it more and more power. And the second part of your question.
Yeah, I was asking about like how do they you kind of answered it, how do you build with courage and not like it's almost like when you're trying to build a fire and you have to blow on it, but if
Yeah.
you're afraid of blowing it out, you're not going to give it enough air and it's going to go out anyway. Another example would be a butterfly, right? When you catch a butterfly in your palm, it's like when you want it to stay in your palm, what do? You keep an open palm, right?
Yeah.
When you want it to stay in your palm, you don't ball it up, you would hurt it. And so it's the energy of that, but with your dreams. And so how do you keep an open palm, open hearted energy, even in the midst of a storm?
So another thing with that, and I love that butterfly metaphor. It is so perfect and so delicate. And I start saying this by saying that I am a Scorpio sun. So as I'm going here into a heavier topic, but the only tattoo I've considered getting is memento mori, which means remember that you will die.
Mm,
um, but I do get this sense of in this, beautiful lifetime that I have, if I get to the end of it and I haven't done this thing, how am I going to feel?
mm,
If I haven't tried, if I ever really get it, like there are certain things where I'm like, oh, if I get to 70, and again, ask the elders in your life. That's another big Saturn lesson. Saturn's associated with elders. So if you have access to healthy and loving elders, connect with them because they will tell you what really matters. Or, volunteer at a nursing home, anything to get it. If you're going through some Saturn energy, get some positive relationships with some old people. It's a pro tip. But the thing is, you'll especially even reading books or articles where people talk about, nurses talk about interviewing people on their deathbeds and what actually ends up mattering. And again, you can ask yourself this question and whether or not the answer comes through immediately, sitting with a question. But a lot of times, this little spark of life in you will will just start to, maybe it's whispering, maybe it's shouting, but it'll be like, no, we have to try. We have to do this thing. I don't want to, I don't want to get to 90 and not have done this thing or not have given it a shot.
mm,
And the other thing too is, well, there was an old social media creator who said, I've been broke before. I didn't die. There's just this, there's this sense of, we're so terrified to fail or to fall on your face. And of course, I hold that. Most people I know hold that fear. Um, most things you're going to pretty much survive. So there's this sense of, all right, do I want to, again, let this fear win and let these other opinions win without just at least taking a big swing and letting my life force come out fully and trying? Forgive the goth kid Scorpio over here,
No,
but
it's fine. It's fine. I love it. It's welcome. And you mentioned something and it jogged something for me of like defining failure, right? Like really defining failure for yourself, not letting society define failure for you. And I think about Amazon. It took 8 years. The Amazon, which is like one of the biggest companies in the world, it took 8 years for it to become profitable. Bezos was taking loans from family members and friends for 8 years. Same with Facebook. I think Facebook was 7 years. And so it's like define failure for
yeah,
yourself, like if my business were not profitable for 8 years, I don't know if I could stand 8 years, right? But it's
yeah,
like, look at where it is now. He in all of his, again, like so many so many
yep.
political critiques of him as a person, but we can't take away his faith in himself and his faith in his company because he endured those 8 years where he really wasn't turning a profit, and I look at, if I strip the fact that he's a billionaire now off of it and I just say how many people in regular society could handle 8 years of perceived failure. I'm sure
Yep.
that people tried to say like, hey, hang it up, Jeff, like go get a job, like whatever,
Hmm,
like just
hmm.
go open a bookstore, because Amazon started as a bookstore. So it's like, just go open a bookstore, like that'll be more
Yeah.
profitable. And I think that you have to have a level of self-belief. Like you have to have a level of radical self-belief. That's kind of what I got from what you were saying, that, and if you need to borrow someone else's belief in you until it grows, that seed of belief grows, that's okay too.
Hmm.
So do you have anything else that you want to say before we close here?
I'd say first, I think I just have to comment. It's really funny that you talked about 7 and 8 years when that 7 to 8 year period is a Saturn square. So we're
Yeah.
having this conversation about Saturn, and Saturn is like, I am right here.
Yeah,
But
I love
um,
it.
yeah, I'd say again, as someone Saturn ruled and who works with a lot of folks going through or coming out of their Saturn return, Saturn can be your biggest ally. Saturn can be a huge resource, a great friend, a masterful teacher. And again, it's not pleasant, but even again from that open, full perspective, a lot of life is very unpleasant. Life's pleasant and it is also unpleasant. We can be present with both and all of the ranges within and in between. Um, but let let Saturn do its best for you. Ask Saturn for support and help. Ask elders, ask ancestors, ask folks around you living with you, for that structure. Like let Saturn build the bones of your life and see them as just as valuable, if not more so, than the trimmings.
Mhm.
And yeah, just go Saturn.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. Saturn is building the bones of your life right now. And I don't know, I know you're pretty tall, right? I think when we met in
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm up 5'9.5". And so when I was in the second grade, I was growing and my knees were hurting so bad. And, like, do you remember, like, painful like, when you're
Yup.
tall, it's painful.
It hurts.
So so that can kind of be that metaphor for Saturn of, like, yeah, sometimes when you're growing, it is painful, but on the other end, if you can see what Saturn has done for you, you put it so beautifully. So, thank you so much, Taylor. Can you tell the people where they can find you, where you hang out, if they have any questions for you or if they wanna work with you?
Absolutely. So online, I'm at valoraastrology.com, and you can find me on social media on Instagram and TikTok at Valora Astrology. In person, I am based in Denver, Colorado, and I give free talks all the time. I do workshops and lead group events, and also happy to travel for opportunities as well. But those are the best ways to get in touch with me. And also for everyone who is viewing this recording, I have a special coupon code just for you. So it is Rebuild 33. And so for any digital or virtual service, astrology reading or Reiki session, you'll get 33% off for watching this fantastic podcast.
Yay, thank you so much. That's so generous. Oh my gosh. So thank you so much. And thank you. I will see everyone in the next recording. Bye.